Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first FP podcast interview with Marco Masi. I'm Wagish, and I'd like to be interviewing with Marco Masi about free progress education. And today we will be learning more about free progress education from Marco Masi. Uh, more background about Marco. He was actually born in Italy in 1965. He graduated in physics in the University of Padua, and he later obtained his PhD in the University of Trento. He worked as a postdoc researcher in the University of Italy, also France and Germany. Quite recently in Germany, he has been working as a school teacher in Germany for 3 years. He went, but for now he has quit his job as a school teacher in Germany because he was pretty disappointed with the educational system, the formal educational system there in Germany. So he's putting some time into this free progress education project uh, that also encompasses a lot on the aspect of individual learning. So that's mainly what FPE, the main idea of FPE is. Um, he also very recently wrote on a subject of FPE. He wrote a book. You can actually find his book titled Free Progress Education in Amazon, and the link is provided in the description below. Hmm. Right. So hello, Marco. How's your day been? How has your day been today?
Hi Vagish, thank you
Hi.
for having me here.
Good. So your day have been great, or it's good?
Well, I just woke up. I don't know. I
Yes,
still
yes.
have to discover it's the day. Well, outside is bad weather.
It's pretty bad weather.
Typical German cloudy weather.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Over in Singapore, it's pretty warm and like
yeah,
humid.
yeah. You are much more fortunate in this sense. Yeah.
I guess, yeah. So anyway, we can start by asking a bit more about FE. So what is maybe you can let the audience know what FE is about.
Well,
Mm.
it's a long story. How FP, of course, it's an acronym for Free Progress Education.
Mhm.
I tend not to describe it only as a free education, because when I say free education, people think about free of charge,
Yes, yes.
which, of course, this is also ideally, I think also in these terms, as
Mhm.
education should of course be free of charge, or at least
Yes.
it should cost you at less as possible. So, but I added also the word progress, because I believe that the ideal of education is not just learning some stuff, some formal stuff or some knowledge, and then apply it somewhere in industry or in your job or to make money. It is much more than that. It can be also, of course, also that. It should also be eventually be that, but it should first and foremost uh, help you to develop yourself and to progress. The progress of your individuality, the
Mm-mm.
progress of, let's put it so, of your soul. It's a free progress of the soul. This is the aim of education. Education comes from the word educere, from the Latin. Sorry if I'm so, I don't want to make it so literate and intellectual, I think, but the word means to drag out something, to take something out from.
Mhm.
What is it? It is to let free your individual potentialities, your
Mm.
soul, your inner being, and let it free to express itself.
Exactly.
And it's precisely what nowadays education does not allow for.
Mm.
And unfortunately, despite the fact that the etymology of this word
Mm.
expresses some ancient wisdom.
Yes.
Probably during the time of the ancient Romans and the Greeks, they knew very well what education should be. Now we have evidently forgotten this, and I went through schools, universities, research centers. I worked also as a teacher, so I had a sort of grand vision. I saw the educational system from all sides, and I can tell you in very good detail what education should not be. Uh, and from there, and from this dissatisfaction, from this disappointment, and that's also why I left my job as a teacher finally, I developed an understanding and also a proposal of how education should be, and I called it free progress
Free
education.
progress.
It's not entirely my, I must say this also to be honest, it's not entirely my expression. It is an idea that has also already put forward by ancient Indian sages, Sri Aurobindo and the so-called mother, Mira Alfassa, who already, they are more famous in India, but they are also known in the Western world. They are with yogis, mystics, whatever you might
Interesting.
like to call them. And then that there is already a movement in India, and they spoke about a free progress of education. That where I took this expression from them, but it is not. And did not just copy what they said. I'm speaking of my personal
Yes,
experience. It's not
yes.
just a theory.
That is interesting. So, in summary, you believe free progress education to be something that the individual learns in education that comes from the soul inside.
Yeah, we can express it in this way. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I must admit, I have also a bit of a metaphysical approach to this, but I don't think you must believe in. I don't like it to put it on the metaphysical aspect, because one can believe or one cannot also not believe in
Also.
these things. I simply say, let us speak about the possibility of people, and especially of children, first of all, and also of students, of youngsters, but I would say more or less every one of us, to express ourselves, to express what we have inside of us. And every one of us has interests, passions, hobbies,
Yes.
but almost in all cases, we feel that we are trapped in a system that does not allow us to express these passions. And this is especially in education. I think the one of the most, I don't know if it is the most important, but it is the most urgent, most urgent necessity for change nowadays in this historical situation, is that to change the educational system. Because if we do not change the educational system, and if the educational system does not allow for this free expression, of ourselves, call it the soul or call it our
Inner being.
passions and interests, in a but passions, our passions and
Yes,
interests,
yes.
then humanity, I think, will go towards a more
Precisely.
and more
I agree.
technocratic society that will not allow us to express ourselves, and this will have very bad and consequences that will become worse and worse with time passing by, especially with the new generations. I believe the new generations will not accept any longer that kind of school system and that kind of educational system that we have today. And this tension will increase with time
Over time.
passing by.
That's interesting.
So I'm sorry, I forgot what was your question now, but
Yeah. So actually, my first question was basically asking, telling the audience about free progress education.
yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay, there are lots of things if someone likes to know the details,
You can find the
just
description below in the book, in his book.
yeah, there is a description. I did also a smaller, not too short introduction to free progress
Yes,
education,
and also
and
also you can check him interviewing me. Also, we also have some lengthy discussions about education and things like that.
yeah,
So anyway,
yeah, that's.
that also.
May I add one thing to this, because the question that might arise at this point is, okay, that this is an idea that also lots of other people have. Let's
Yes,
free
yes.
education, people and children and students should become more free in expressing themselves. Every teacher will will tell you that.
And also,
So,
people say, just toughen up. This is the real world is like this. You have to react to it in a positive way. You have to be
yeah,
optimistic.
yes, this is the worst part.
Yes,
This is a, these are still the people who are deeply engraved in this matrix. I
yes,
call it
yes,
matrix, like the film. And I
yes,
use
yes.
also to say the film was not so fiction as it is, if you might believe. I think this plays a reality
Mm,
that is very real. Something it displays something that is
yeah,
very real, I believe. Um, but what is the real difference? That there are also other proposals about freeing education. There are also other proposals about typical examples could be the so-called democratic schools,
mhm,
or Sudbury, the models of the Sudbury Valley schools, and so on. There are also all self-directed education of Peter Gray and these people, and they are wonderful. They are certainly a giant leap. This is a real giant leap of humankind, not that one on the moon, I believe. Um, they really are working on a great project, but what is missing for me, and at least for in my humble opinion, is that they are too much focused on the education of children, which is fine, which is extremely important,
mhm.
but we are doing nothing, almost nothing, for higher education.
Yes,
Higher education is an enslaved system, as exactly as primary and secondary education in schools.
mhm,
We have really, I don't know the universities in the United States, but I read what we have there, and I think that is, and also in Singapore, you already
yes,
told us something about that.
mm,
I think it is a global problem. It
yes,
is not a problem of a single nation.
yes,
It is a global problem that higher education, which means high school already, and college, university,
mm,
and also in research centers. Uh, Also, after what you do when you have done already your PhD. When I made my PhD, I thought, oh, now I'm free and I kind of worked on something. And I was disappointed again, and it's still not true. All the system is a giant Moloch, a giant matrix, which represses our
mm,
self unfoldment, self development. And it is so this problem, we should begin also to focus not only on reforming, and not only, I mean, don't like the word reforming, on uh, focusing ourselves on a new form of the education, not only for schools and for schools children, but for the entire
mm,
educational spectrum, which
yes,
means high school, college,
mm,
university, how we conceive doing research, and
mm,
after all, also how we work in our jobs and
mm,
the working environment. So free progress education is a proposal for freeing education according to a free progress concept in schools and also for higher education. And that's the second part, is somehow missing in most of the proposals that I have seen. There are some things that you can
mm,
see, find on the internet here and there, but it is something that is still not contemplated.
mm,
Just think about one on this. when we speak of people who are professional professors of in pedagogical sciences and didactical sciences, they always specialize in the pedagogy of children, which is fine. It's great. That must be the first step. But there is no pedagogy in universities. Professors in universities can teach whatever they want, and whatever they want, it's okay. But how they teach is irrelevant. Whereas I think we must question this
Yes.
point. Is it really
Actually,
just unimportant how a professor teaches in university? I think that we should consider.
I see a very much deeper point, because the culture of the university follows from high school. It also follows from their primary school, like grade one onwards. The culture just continues upwards towards higher education. So it's not like a separate culture completely from high school. It's not a separate culture completely from,
Yeah,
pre-existing systems. So you were talking about pedagogy. So people tend to focus more on pedagogy on children. They tend to focus on education on children, but education in a broader sense is much broader. It's not just for young people. It's all. I mean, definitely people who are older, they are also always learning something. Am I right? It could be in their jobs. It could be in education. It could be in schools also. People are always learning.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. So you also mentioned that the education should come from the inner being, from inside, instead of some
Yeah,
external stimuli. Yeah, this is a
yeah,
very good point.
yeah. That's so-called intrinsic
Intrinsic
motivation. There,
motivation.
one distinguishes between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation.
Mm.
And nowadays, almost all our education is based primarily on extrinsic motivation. You get your piece of paper when you have a grade, when you finish your school, you will get a job, you will earn money, and so on. This is an extrinsic motivation.
Yes, yes.
And still, it is lacking, our educational system is lacking on focusing on intrinsic motivation, where you study just from because you like something.
Precisely.
But what is a practical use? A practical. Nowadays everything must be practical. But I mean, the most what is it practical? For example, music. Yeah, it is practical. Is it practical? Yeah, for the few that can make money with music, but the very few. But music is it practical? I don't know. There is nothing from the material point of view, and also from the financial point of view, for most people, it is not something practical. But
Mm.
what would be a world without music? It would be horrible. or painting something. A lot of people just paint. Why? Because they just like it.
Precisely.
This uh, I hear this also very frequently from people who
Mhm.
are already open to the idea of new forms of education, and they often say, but in school we learn too abstract things which are not practical. Yes, I'm against too abstract things. Of course, children should not be forced to learn abstract and too
But
intellectual things.
children might be interested in them. Might be, could be.
If you are interested in practical things, it's okay too.
Mm.
Maybe you become a great engineer, or you are the next Elon Musk. Yeah,
Yeah.
these people are very practical, and that's
Mm.
fine. But if I just want to dream about, I don't know, the next elementary particle that will be discovered, but this is just an elementary particle among hundreds that we know nowadays, and that if I discover this elementary particle, it's just another particle as many others and will not change anything in our understanding of the universe. But if I like it to pursue such a,
Yes,
why not?
exactly. Yeah.
This
And in the
focus,
process, in the process of pursuing that dream, you can also learn a lot of things. Am I right to say that?
yeah, good
Correct.
point. Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, yes, yes. In the
Mm.
process of learning, you discover new things that you didn't imagine to discover, and that they even exist. And that's mostly how science works. Nowadays, much less, unfortunately. But if you look in the history of science, most of discoveries have been done not because they said, now we must discover this, and then they looked for it, and then they discovered it. Sometimes it happens in this way, but most of the times it does not.
Mm.
Most of the times it is something, there's someone who is just interested in pursuing research, and then discovers something. For example, think at Mendel. What was his name? Joseph Mendel, the guy. I'm not a biologist, so I don't know. The guy who discovered the laws of genetics. He just planted his plants, and suddenly he discovered some regularities. And from there, an idea came to his mind. Or there are also people who just develop some theories and are probably even not aware that they have done something groundbreaking.
Mhm.
Like Carnot, the Carnot cycle
Yes.
of
Yes.
physics.
Yes.
He died, and nobody knew him.
Yes.
Only later his papers were found, and they saw, oh, but this guy has discovered something groundbreaking. And his principles, he
Mm.
discovered one of the most basic principles of thermodynamics.
You can
And
you can give many examples. Also,
they,
like Brownian motion, statistical mechanics,
uh,
practically
mhm,
everything. Everything, anything that great in science, it just comes from some study, some curiosity. Like,
yeah, from curiosity.
yes, yes.
Whereas nowadays education is uh, structured according a plan, a roadmap. Oh, now they call it roadmap. Okay,
Mm.
that's different. Then everything changes if you call it roadmap. And but the word in itself is also revealing. I tell you which road you must go, but along the road, most times you discover things that are much more interesting than the aim and the final arrival of your road that you imagined before is uh, along the road you discover new things, and you might say, okay, I don't go along this road, I go along, and then that, and then that, and then I make a final interesting discovery.
Mm.
Whereas nowadays also in the schools there is a curriculum, and you must learn this, and that. And it's already pre-ordered, and it's already in advance. You have something that is, you have already a roadmap, and you are not allowed to go along different branches while you are going along this road.
Mm.
And this is something that kills
Mm.
curiosity. It kills
Mm.
creativity.
So,
And that's one of the biggest problem of our
mm,
educational system.
I would like to add another point from my experience. What you see in university, it's they will say that, oh, the physics department, the the percentage of undergraduates not getting a job before their graduation is much lower. So what the government typically does, they will cut some places in the university in the physics department. So they reduce the number of students in the physics
Ah,
department. I hear stories like
yeah,
this. So just before I graduated, I was hearing the professor telling this.
yeah.
They
So
cut,
they
they were cut
yeah,
because of very practical things. They'll just cut. So what they're interested in is for undergraduates to get jobs. That's it.
yeah.
And have a living.
Unfortunately, most of our schools and universities are still too much focused on the idea that the education is for giving you a job. But this, I think, slowly but steadily, people are getting. that there is something wrong with that. What people still are struggling with is, okay, this educational system is not working well. We have some problems here, but what is the alternative? And here I see that there are very different approaches. One is that of the democratic schools, and this is fine. But we have not something of this sort, a sort of self-directed educational approach in colleges and universities, because there it is, yeah, it's not so easy as in schools, because in schools you can still say, okay, children are children, they like to play, let them play, and we have still time to deal with the problem of getting a job, to make money, a living, and so on. When you are an adult person and you are in a university, the pressure of the external world, now you must do something, find your job, get a way, fight for a way how for paying your bills. This psychological pressure increases, and people adapt themselves much more. And adults can do this better than children, adapting to the system. Fortunately and unfortunately also. And we must also, I think, introduce this idea of free development of someone's personality also in universities and high school. Let's begin with high schools, because already in high school we see that. And how can we achieve this? Because after all, if we abolish, for example, grades, and we let young people free to do whatever they want, well, but then they don't come out with a piece of paper, a certificate that attests their abilities. And that's where I think we should also really not only think in new terms and not only explain ourselves first of all what we want to abolish, but we must also try to understand and to think about what can we introduce. What can on one side, first we must abolish the current system, but then we must also have some ideas how to replace the system. And I think that one of the most interesting ideas that is coming now, that many people are thinking about, is the idea of a so-called competence portfolio. A portfolio is simply a document that documents what you have done along your educational path. It is not a curricula. If in a curriculum you have, I have learned this, I take these classes, I have made this examination, I got these grades, and on the piece of paper there is a final number, or a letter which tells how well you performed in repeating like a parrot your lesson or your lecture.
This is quite interesting, actually. So you could kind of think like it could be some kind of a LinkedIn profile, but not for a career or job, but for education.
Well, I didn't understand the last part acoustically. It is linked.
LinkedIn.
Linked profile.
No, LinkedIn. Have you heard of LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
So people use it for jobs, but in this case, it will be a LinkedIn for education.
Yes.
Precisely. Yes.
But LinkedIn is still something based on idea. Show me your curriculum vitae.
Yeah.
Okay. A portfolio does this too, but it's much more than that. It's a portfolio says, for example, as a physicist, I like to make physical examples of physics. It's becoming white and white. I don't know if you still see me. Let me. I like to make the example of building, for example. How someone might be interested in radioactivity. How do radioactivity work? And I want to build Müller-Geiger counter. This is quite not too complex device, but it is not so easy to build it because first of all you must learn electromagnetism, what is electricity, how it works, what is radioactivity, what's the principle is of a Geiger-Müller counter. I mean, this device with which you measure radioactivity, and so on. You must learn a lot of things, first of all, theoretically, and then build it in practice. And it will take a long time, and eventually you need someone who helps you, and etc., etc., etc. And you can build this if you are passionate about it. I knew, because I knew someone who is very passionate about this and and wanted to build it. He didn't manage to do this because he also have time and money and blah blah blah. But I mean, someone who is in high school, for example, can try to build this and document step by step what he or she has learned during this this is also practical application and building of the device. And he can document it on his competence portfolio, where he says, okay, I've learned this, this, and that, and have built this, this, and that. And I bet most of high school, even of university physics students, would not know how to build such a device, because mostly they have learned things only theoretically. They have learned the things that they had to learn, and they have no practical, practical experience in this. Whereas a high school student could try to do this, and this is just an example of one of many. Then you might, let's make other examples in other subjects. In music, you make some music and you can document this. You can also download what you have created. Paint, you have the paintings and you show your paintings, and this you show what kind of techniques you have learned, with whom you have learned. In this competence portfolio nowadays it's easy. You just put a link on a video which documents even further what you have done during all the years, and so on, so on. Imagine someone who must hire people, for some job, technical or non-technical job or whatever. And on one side, he has the students who come from the conventional educational system, and just, I have a master's degree in this, and I got good grades. On the other side comes the poor free progress education student who says, no, I have no certificate to show, but if you like, I can show you what I've done in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And here's my competence portfolio. And I show you I've done this, this, and this. I've learned this, this, and that. Well, eventually, also, why not? I went to a school where I got also there a piece of paper. Why not? I've made eventually also some exams. It does not exclude that you have also followed eventually some classical route. And I'm quite sure that most people who hire, who are looking for other people for a job, will prefer someone who has shown you a competence portfolio instead of just a number of a piece of paper for a certificate. And if it does not, probably I would not like to be hired in that kind of job, because but I think most managers nowadays understand this. And this is just an example of how free progress education can be put in practice can be realized also very practically beyond just abstract ideals. And there are also many others that I could cite, but just this one. And because I like to explain this, because very frequently people ask me, okay, these are great ideas, but in practice you must find for a job, you must learn this, you must learn that. Everything can be done. We have just to get out of this hamster wheel thinking, I like to call it, from this matrix, and look for alternatives and see also in practice we can find for viable alternatives also.
Actually, I see one potential very strong point against us will be something like the idea on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So someone outside would say something like, well, not everyone is motivated. Some people are not even interested in anything. So there has to be some system in place to put them through it. Because there will always be some people who are not interested in anything. But for the sake of like the economy, we have to put people through the schools and things like that.
Yeah, I like it that you come out with objections, because I like to answer objections. This is a typical objection that comes out every time, and it is true. And in fact, this is connected to another type of objection, which says, but well, that's of intrinsic motivation. Not all children are able to do that. It is only for few, and blah blah blah. Well, first of all, let's question ourselves. If there are so few children that are able to express themselves in an environment which lets them free of, and which gives them the opportunity to express themselves with an intrinsic instead of an extrinsic motivation. Is this given by nature, or is this something that they already, it is already an imprint of the educational system that we have today? I think most children are no longer able to do that. But if you look at a little child, a baby, a little child, until before they go to school, most children, I don't think that they learn due to just extrinsic motivation. Maybe also, yeah, you give them something sweet to eat or something like that. But apart from this, yeah, they don't learn through extrinsic motivation, but through intrinsic motivation. If this changes when they go to school, I doubt that this is because of the children and because of the nature of our human nature. It is because the school has changed them. Yeah? And we should eventually consider this. But let me be also the negative guy one. Okay, let's say, okay, that's only for few children. Huh? Okay, but the other children who would like to pursue a classical curriculum, they already have their schools. All the educational system that we have today is based more or less on an extrinsic motivation, but it's not only that. It is based on a system where learning is identified with learning concepts. Learning concepts is only a tiny part of the learning process. You learn a lot of things also without learning concepts, but because you learn through experience. And that must not necessarily be related to concepts. And our educational system is, however, based on this. And if children like to do, and they have no own interests, and they seem not to display particular passion, or they seem not to be mature enough to learn by themselves through a self-directed learning path, the schools are already there. They can
Already
go
there.
to the classical schools. The question is, what about the other ones, the few ones? And I don't think they are so few. I think that's about at least 30%. And I'm very conservative. 30, about 30% from my experience. If you look, at least 30% of school children are depressed. Nowadays we have ADHD, and nobody knows what this really is, but don't let us go into these details. And they have the depression, and then they develop this depression in form of anorexia or bulimia or whatever kind of mental disease. And I think this is related not only perhaps to school. Okay, there are also problems in the families. This is also true, but school makes this worse because they are not allowed to express themselves. So what do we do with this one? They don't have an alternative. There is no real alternative for them. And that's what we are trying to do here. A free progress education paradigm would offer them a real alternative, but not only in schools, also then later.
Later.
Yeah.
So yeah. So in terms of higher learning, so how do you think we can do this in universities?
Yeah, this is also a good question. So, yeah, how do we do it? Yes, there is a problem, in fact. And that's where I get in collision course with unschoolers. Because, unschoolers are those people who, in fact, this is a later development of the homeschooling concept. And there are unschoolers nowadays all over the world. And not so much in Germany because it's not allowed. It is homeschooling and unschooling is simply forbidden by the law. I think in Singapore too, is it? Or I don't know. Just for curiosity, is it allowed homeschooling in?
Yes, but
It
very
is allowed.
yeah, it is.
But okay, it's at any rate it is allowed. Here in Germany, it's completely forbidden. But there is an unschooler movement undercover, not always completely legal, but it exists. And here is a collision course. And that's why I also like to try to make clear what's the difference between a free progress education paradigm and the unschooler paradigm. And because in university here we have at least in some faculties, in some divisions, in some departments, like for example physics, you have physicists, so you know this very well. There is a time where you must sit down and say, okay, now I must learn the basics. And there is it is a hard part, where you cannot avoid to learn really step by step, concepts. First of all, we have to learn a lot of math, calculus, linear algebra, mathematical methods for physics.
Yes.
And then we have to learn classical mechanics, electromagnetism, relativity, quantum mechanics. It's a lot of stuff. It's quite complex, and it needs a lot of time. So how do we manage this in a free progress education paradigm? My proposal is that we should let people be free to learn whatever they want, whenever they want it, and how they want, and how they want to do this. But at the same time, they should be allowed to have a mentor, an advisor, who tells them, look, if you want to learn this, and this, and this, and that, you have to go through this, and this, and this, and that. And you can organize a sort of flipped teaching environment, where I prefer flipped teaching to teacher-centered or professor-centered teaching, because you don't need to make the lessons lecture all over again. You go to a video, you find them also on the internet, you can Google it, all the knowledge in form of textbooks or video courses, you already have them. And there is an experienced advisor who can tell you, so what do you want to make? What you would like to become an expert in particle physics?
Precisely.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, for example. Yes. Sorry, the bad news is that you have to learn, first of all, math. You have to learn this, this, and this, and that. There's no, let's be honest. Otherwise, what can happen, there are a lot of people out there that say, no, but this is your old educational paradigm. We are free learners. And they learn something and then come out with a lot of crackpot theories. Yeah?
Yes.
So-called crackpots or physics cranks. You can find them all over YouTube, and these people are not aware that they don't understand what they are talking about. They are autodidacts, and this is a great thing, and I honor autodidacts, but they seemed not to have they did not
The
understand
rigor.
that they have no rigor, and they seem not to be aware of the fact that they didn't learn what they had to learn before. So this must be made very clear. The student is free to do what he wants or what she wants, but at the same time there is sort of curricula where we are living in a flipped classroom, and first of all, students for them alone at home learn something, for example, calculus in mathematics. This is one of the basics of math that you need to do for doing physics and to become later a particle physicist. Then these people meet in a room or in a university or ideally in a free progress campus where there is an advisor, and they discuss the video or the lecture, the video lecture or the part of their textbook that they have learned first of all by themselves, and they make exercises and so on and so on. This is a so-called flipped teaching method, and they go through this, and there's at the end of this there is not an examination, but again a little portfolio documentation that documents what you have learned. So you have gone through calculus, okay? Invent by yourself how you apply what you have learned to something that makes passionate.
Maybe something that is interest to you, something that is relevant to you. Yes.
But uses the things, the stuff that you have learned in this lecture or in this lectures, in this course. So again, we come back to the portfolio method applied to single courses. And at the end, you have many courses and many portfolio documents that are put together in one big portfolio, and document how each course taught you something, also eventually also very abstract things, because math is abstract, but you build your basics in this way. Then once you have these basics, you have gone through this process, but you were not forced by doing this. You made it by yourself. You have chosen to do this, and you have also expressed yourself, despite the fact that you forced yourself, and that's the great difference. In a free progress education, you are still forced to do something, but you are forcing yourself because you are passionate about it, or you have the aim to learn something, and you know, okay, now I must go to learn that thing up there. I must go through a learning process where I learn the basics first and step by step, but I'm forcing myself. There is not a system that forces the children or
So
adult in doing
it's
so.
so it's more of a positive sense of resilience, not the negative way. There are negative things you have to endure to go through the system. As
Vagish,
what you are proposing is more of the positive side that comes from inside.
it's perfectly natural. Vagish, think, for example,
Mm.
of a child that has to learn to walk. It tries to stand up and
Mhm.
falls, stands up and falls, stand up. For how long? It tries this hundreds and hundreds of times. And where is this resilience gone when they learn in school? I
Exactly.
can
Yes.
tell you as a school teacher, one of the main problems I had with children in school is
Mhm.
exactly the problem of resilience. If they don't get it right immediately, they let it go and say, oh, I'm not able to do anything, and they can to cry. Some even cry, and I'm too stupid, I cannot do it. And I try to tell them, especially in math and physics, but especially in math,
Mm.
in mathematics, I think it's this completely wrong idea that you have to do it immediately right, otherwise you're stupid. Mathematics is made of first and foremost of exercises. If you want to learn a theorem, you learn it only by doing exercises. And at the beginning, most of the times you do it all wrong. You don't get it. You
Yes.
have to
Yes.
do it and do it again until you get it, and then then there is the aha effect. But first, you must go through a tunnel, very sometimes very long tunnel, until you get it. And you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel very frequently. It takes time until you see the light. And there you need a lot of resilience. And what I noticed in children in schools, they have zero resilience. Immediately, if they don't get it right immediately, they are depressed, or they say, oh, it's not something for me, I don't want it, and then throw it all away. And the question is, has this resilience of the little child that tried to learn to walk? Where the only answer can be that the school system, has destroyed it. And the question is if these young people can learn it again. I don't know. I tried, but unfortunately, I must say, in most cases, I was not very successful because it's not something at the mental level that you can. I tried to explain that, but if you try to explain this at a rational level, it does not get through because these children suffer at the emotional level. And it's not something that you can tell them at the rational level. There are then some tricks and techniques with which you can try to make that clear. But it's most of this resilience has been already destroyed by our school system, and I think we have to redevelop an entirely new school system based on a completely different learning paradigm that does not destroy this resilience, which is something natural in us, I
Yes.
think.
Yes. So I think the key here is like the resilience gets destroyed because it's imposed from the external world. But if there's a resilience that comes from inside, it's something
Absolutely.
different. It's so here there's a resilience from in the external world. There's also a resilience that comes from inside. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah,
So I
I
think
think resilience is mostly from the inside.
yes,
It is,
fundamentally
but
it is yes.
if you're forced to learn something that you do not, yeah, it does not interest you, you have much less resilience. It's quite obvious.
Yes.
It's an experience of everyone. If I'm forced to learn something that I'm not at all interested in,
Mm.
okay, as an adult, I can force myself to go on, go on, go on, but you lack an inner force that you
Yes.
have when you're passionate about something.
Yes.
We're
So
passionate about.
one example could be you could be passionate about pursuing some question, and then you might go to a university to take some courses to address that question, but
Mm.
you realize that it's not helping much. Even if by talking to people, it's not very helpful. Then you realize that there's something.
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely. People pursue some question, and you are
yes.
forced to learn something that does not at all answer these questions.
Mm,
And so you go for years and years. I've learned a lot of mathematics, and for physics
mhm.
that I never used again. Whereas, just sorry if I'm doing this parallel, but it's just because it's me. I believe this can be said about more or less every subject and every topic. But I wanted to pursue particle physics, and you need some sort of math that they don't tell you, even not in university. But
Yes.
let me be free to learn what I really need, and I know what I need. Don't
Precisely.
impose me your passions, because this
Yes.
is also something that you find very frequently in teachers and professors. They tell you, oh, but I learned a lot of things by doing this and this and that. Yes, it's right, you learned this. But this
Exactly.
idea that something that if something was very useful for you, then it, it must be very useful also for others, is a completely wrong idea. It
Exactly.
doesn't.
I agree with that.
But this is deeply engraved in our
Yes.
educational system, high
Mm-mm.
school, at university, and also in schools, and for teachers, professors, everywhere.
Yes.
You can I cannot tell you how many times they told me, but you must do this and that, because even if you don't like it, when I did that, it gave me a lot of things. I learned a lot of things from it. I went through, yes, there are some, but what I really learned was, to be frank, how education should not be.
Yeah. So also you will hear, like for example, some professor will say, "Oh, you have to go through this. You have to get good grades to get a job." But when I went to every single job interview, they didn't even ask me what grades you got, what class level was your honors. They didn't even ask me. They just say, "Okay, what have you done? What is your experience? What jobs have you done? Any internship?" That's it. Actually, I went to
Yeah,
multiple companies. So it's strange.
yeah,
So professors they were telling, oh, you need to get a good grades. You need to have like that to be successful. And then they will tell their story. They will tell that their story. They done this, they done that. They went through this process and that process. And then look where I am now. You see, I'm talking like this.
exactly.
It's and they try to enforce it on other people. So
They extrapolate their story to the stories of others. Their story was very useful for them, but every one of us is different.
different. Yes, exactly.
I'm different from you. You're different from me. That everyone has his strengths and weaknesses. Everyone has his interests and passions. Everyone likes something, and what you might like, I might dislike. So there is still very deeply engraved this idea. Oh, I have learned a lot of things by doing that. It's good also for you. And the thing with the grades, you also mentioned this idea with the grade. I had also a lot of experience with school children who want even to repeat the entire year because they did not get uh,
Yes,
good enough grades, and
yes,
say,
yes.
listen, you have gone through, you have your piece of paper, you have your certificate. Why do you want to go all over again
Hmm.
just to have a better grade? This not, makes no sense. I
You
can assure you, when you are looking for a job, an intelligent someone, how will you call it? Someone who looks for people for his job, and an intelligent manager who has to hire someone does not look at your grades. They just look, do you went to school? Can you read and write? Okay. Uh, most of the times you don't need, I think 80% of what I've learned in school, I never needed really in university. Also, when I went to even math, all the entire mathematics, I have to go through from the ABC again. I have to learn it all over again in university, and I didn't use it in the kind of math that I used to learn in school. I didn't use it later, and I used to learn for 4 or 5 years Latin. That is also a good thing. A lot of people say I've learned Latin, and it was very useful for me. Okay, I respect this. Might be true. I don't have any. I'm not against teaching Latin, but I say for me it was not useful. Eventually, if I should have learned some dead language, I should have learned Greece. Much more often I need Greece, but okay, these are details. But just to make an example, how I was forced to learn for years and years and years, almost all my entire career, things that I didn't feel necessary and interesting. And would I have been allowed to do something else? I believe, well, one never knows, but I have not the crystal ball. But I think I would have produced much more interesting things, and maybe
Yes.
also much more practical things, also for others, for the world.
Yeah.
Whereas I was in university, I worked also as a PhD on so-called nanophotonics. It's nanotechnology is perhaps a more common a name that people know. And when I look back, I say, well, yes, it was interesting. That's a lot of interesting things. It was a very interesting and interesting experience. But I'm very skeptic of how money is spent today in research. I see lots and lots of billions of dollars or euros, or the kind of money that you, what do you use in Singapore? What kind of?
Singapore dollars, SGD.
I think yeah, Singapore dollars. Yes, right. So dollars are okay. Billions and billions, billions of dollars in research lines and research topics that probably we can already say nowadays that they probably will not have that bright future that they want to depict. Maybe they will discover something, but I think most of nowadays research topics are a waste of money. Or okay, let's not be so negative, but they will not lead to that revolution that people are now
Thinking of.
hoping for and thinking of. I can say that because, first of all, just look at the result of the 20, 30, for last 20, 30, 40 years. And secondly, they certainly did not meet the expectations in lots of big science projects. But secondly, all these big science projects are designed again on an educational system and on a research, on a research paradigm that is industrialized,
Yes.
where there
Yes.
are a lot of thousands of ants, yeah, and researchers that work like little soldiers on projects, and mostly they are not free to think, they are not free to work, and they are not free to do what they really want. The times of Einstein, who was working in a patent office, they most of the times then this objection comes forward, that they say, but the times of Einstein working in the patent office are gone. No, we have destroyed these times. I don't think they are gone. It is in the inner nature, in the nature of everyone, in the human nature, every one of us, to say to be passionate about something and say, oh, now I want to make the research on this, but what is this useful for? I don't know, and I don't give a shit what what it is useful for. I just
Exactly.
like it
Yeah.
and I do it, and then the research, and then
Yeah.
suddenly a revolution comes out.
Yeah.
Einstein invented his relativity theory not in academia, not in a university, but in a probably in a tiny office, patent office. And one can make a lot of other examples of like that. I'm not saying that we should reduce university to just a bunch of people who close themselves in an ivory tower or something like that. I just say that yes, we can also organize an academia according a structured system. Yes, there must be rules and laws, and there must be some order. And this sort of environment can be not just a big chaos, but we should free also the researcher, the PhD student, the college and university student, not only high school students and children, to let them free to make a research on that topic as they wish, and that's gone, and it is wrong that it is gone, not because it is an inevitable malady, but because we have imposed this to ourselves. It is our systems that it is going in the wrong direction, and that's why we have a lot of research nowadays where a lot of potential discoveries could have been done but did not, whereas a lot of other things we have spent a lot of money with sometimes very frequently meager results because the spirit is not free.
Mm.
That's what.
Yeah. So that was quite a while, quite a lengthy discussion we had. Do you have
Yeah.
any do you think you have any concluding remarks?
Okay. Oh, no, I could go on and on for
Yes,
hours and
yes.
hours about that, but um, no, the only concluding remark is that I encourage people to think, to ponder, to question, not to think, to question
Mm.
our educational system as it is nowadays. I invite also so-called unschoolers to rethink perhaps also their point of view, because they still are stuck in my humble opinion, even they are stuck somehow in the old paradigm, because they see education just as, oh, let's go into the woods and sing, and because you learn a lot of
It's
things also from
yeah.
life, and that's true, absolutely true.
It's maybe
Uh,
unschoolers could be something as an extrinsic sociological, like some sociological kind of a group thing instead of something more fundamental.
what do you mean by sociological groupthink? I'm
Uh,
not sure that I got
okay.
it.
So you just call yourself an unschooler and you do it like that. You might or you might not. The belief it doesn't. It might not necessarily come from the inner soul.
Yeah,
Mm.
yes, they
Precisely. Yeah.
they
Mm.
they have a lot of
Mhm.
scares. They have been burned by the old educational system.
Yes.
And then also unschoolers, also the parents of unschoolers that want to pursue and want to open themselves for the children to an unschooling paradigm, uh, react emotionally to everything which is somehow structured. Also, learning needs a structure, and unschoolers will say, no structures, because they uh, the, immediately, instinctively, they think at school, as a
Mm.
traditional school. Also, learning needs a structure. This is a myth. And the successful unschoolers that have gone through all the learning paradigm, they sooner or later
Realize.
realize it. Yes, I have learned by myself, but I gave myself a structure in this learning. And but everything that is organized and has a structure, and when I speak about, for example, a free progress campus, a free progress, I don't like it to call it school, but a free progress college, university, or something like that, they immediately react, no, we are against systems. The word system. But everything that we believe is a system.
Yes,
Also, unschooling is a system. I mean,
precisely.
you
It's
cannot get rid of that.
because
No,
as long as mm, as long as it's an idea or ideology, it's still some domain. It's some domain or field.
my, you see, everything is an ideology. I mean, also free progress education is an ideal, not an ideology, an ideal.
Idea.
Let's
Yeah.
say, and also ideals. I don't claim that this is everything right and wonderful and perfect and final. But it tries to go beyond this idea of unschooling, bringing this idea of unschooling also into higher education.
Mm.
And this is there are some
This.
attempts. I have described this also in my
Mm.
book, where I have described some attempts of this sort. There are some, but yeah, at least it's very, very. I think I can only 2 or 3 examples in the whole world come to my
Mm.
mind where perhaps a few dozens of people are
Yeah.
engaged in this.
I mean,
So
also.
the
Mm.
message is that think about new educational forms for schools, high
Mhm.
schools, and also higher education, and how we can put this in practice also for quite complex faculties, topics, and how can we put this in practice. I believe I have a proposal as a free progress education paradigm, but of course, it's just a proposal.
Anyway, you can find his proposal in the link below. So I think we will end our session here. It was quite a lengthy session.
Okay.
So if you're interested to find
Yeah.
more details about his our free progress education project, you can find it in our book. You can also follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We are also uploading this on SoundCloud as a podcast. So thank you everyone. Thank you Marco Masi for sharing a long session with
Thank you.
us
Thank you too.
on free
You
progress
too.
education. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be coming up with more podcasts in the future. So I hope you stay in tune. Thank you everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Vagish. Thank you too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.